Hey everyone, and welcome to one more episode of Protecting Wildlife. And today I have Dr. Joshua Rukundo. I hope I say your name correctly. Welcome
Yes,
to you.
thank you, Tanya.
You're welcome. And he is from an amazing organization that's called Chimpanzees Sanctuary of Wildlife Conservation Toys. So tell me a little bit, what is this organization about?
Yes, the Chimpanzee Trust, which is the short form for the Chimpanzee Sanctuary and Wildlife Conservation Trust, does three things. First, we manage a sanctuary for chimpanzees. Currently, we have 52 orphaned and rescued chimpanzees that we take care of. And we also do environmental conservation, particularly looking at the protection and the restoration of habitats of wildlife, particularly the chimpanzee, especially in areas where it has been degraded, outside areas where there's no protection, like formal protection, like national parks. And also the final bit we do is education. Education is very, very key, very, very important to get people to change their mindsets and their attitudes towards the protection of wildlife, towards the conservation of the environment. So those are the three things that we mainly do. We operate in Uganda. Uganda is a small country in East Africa, and in the Albertine region, that is on the western side of our country, where the Albertine region is along the left arm of the Rift Valley. It is known to be the most biodiversity rich area in the world, literally. There are so many species concentrated in that Rift Valley, of which the primates, which are most important, or our target. But there are so many other species that are in need of protection through our work and through the work also of other conservation agencies. Yeah.
Beautiful. And just what is the vision for the chimpanzees from your work?
Chimpanzees are believed to be the closest relative to humans. We share DNA that is very similar, 98.7% similar DNA, along with other apes. We have 5 apes, that is the human beings, the chimpanzee, the gorilla, the orangutan, the bonobo. But the chimpanzee and the gorilla are the closest to human beings, as in they're the most recent, in the branching of evolution. And so they are very, very similar to us. They're very similar to us in physiology, in biology. They're very similar to us in some characters and characteristics, in terms, especially with the chimpanzees, the way they're gregarious, they live with other chimpanzees, they live in communities, they learn to care for each other, they learn to defend each other and promote each other, just like how humans are. Really, the literal difference that they have is that us as human beings, we're able to vocalize, we're able to speak. They can't vocalize, but not form words, but they have one form of communication. And because of their similarity to human beings, they've been exploited for that. They have been, used to test lots of drugs, vaccines, been sent to the moon. They were the first primate to step on the moon or into space, because the way they react to the environment is very similar to us. Where it's a big disadvantage is that their rate of propagation or their ability to reproduce is a lot curtailed compared to human beings. Human beings have a much higher fertility rate, a much higher rate of propagation compared to these chimpanzees. And as such, over time, and also due to they're being hunted, they're being exploited for human use, for all kinds of things, their numbers have depleted to, being threatened. They're actually listed on the IUCN Red List as a vulnerable species, a threatened species, because their numbers have reduced so much in the world over. They are in Africa. They're only found naturally in Africa and in certain areas of Africa, but their numbers have reduced over the last maybe 50 years to less than 100,000 chimpanzees in the entire continent. And in Uganda alone, we've been having about between 5,000 to 6,000 chimpanzees only, down from about 25,000 about 50 years ago. And our work, we feel, is very important in conserving this species because we've learned so much from it. We've taken so much advantage out of it. So many of the advances made in medicine have been credited to chimpanzees. I think we've had lots of stories about chimpanzees that have been kept in laboratories their lives over because they were used to test and retest and develop all kinds of products that we use, both medical products and non-medical products, and even to test certain situations of changes in environment, how they react to weightlessness, how they react to certain extreme variations in environments because of how similar they are to us. And because of that, we need to give back a little bit. We need to make sure that we preserve these species for future generations, as a responsibility as human beings on this earth. We've been put here to care for the earth and take care of it as the top species on the earth, or at least we like to believe we are. So we have a responsibility to take care of them and preserve them and protect them and make sure that they are able to thrive. Man has caused the extinction of so many species of animals, and that it's a high time that we put a stop to this. And those that we are still left with, we are able to make sure that we're able to preserve them and conserve them, such that we continue to learn from them. Even as we speak right now, we continue to learn from these species and also to allow them to also develop and evolve just as what we've done. So that is why we feel that our work is so important. It started out with just rescuing orphaned chimpanzees. These are chimpanzees where they have been removed from their mothers, they have been removed from their communities for export, for pet trade, for putting in laboratories, for our own entertainment. And every time a young infant is removed from the family, because they are so protective of each other, possibly 5 other adult chimps are killed. And that really reduces their numbers. You know, they're very, very protective of their young because they don't, like I said already, they don't really have that many young. A chimpanzee cares for its young one for up to 5 years before it has another chimpanzee or another baby. And because of that and their short lifespan, they'll probably have 3 or at most 4 babies in their lifetime. And if a few are always removed or they die due to disease or other circumstances, you find that the next generation has fewer animals and fewer chimpanzees than the one after that, and their numbers keep dwindling. So our work started with the sanctuary to rescue these chimpanzees that were meant for export but have been separated from their mothers and their communities, and were living in dire conditions. They were being malnourished, they were being exposed to conditions that are not natural to them. They were being sold for all kinds of reasons, for entertainment, to laboratories, to private zoos and things like that. And once we set up the sanctuary and we had a few that we started with about 11 chimpanzees that had been confiscated from pet traders. And as the numbers increased, we decided to expand our program to see where it is they're coming from, why are they being removed from their communities in those areas, and to stop that from happening. And that's when we started our program, our conservation program, and our education program, because many times until people understand and teach themselves to appreciate why we need to conserve wildlife species, they often believe that what they're doing is okay and is normal, and for whatever reasons they have. Sometimes it's driven by poverty, sometimes it's driven by greed. But we've seen from our own experience that we've been doing this now for about 22 years, that people's attitudes can change, people's attitudes can evolve, and they can become promoters of the protection of these species, the protection of their habitats, and in turn, also the protection of other wildlife that also utilize these habitats. So yeah, that's why we feel the chimpanzee is so important. It has been a very great learning tool because as humans, we can already see how we are so similar to them. We can relate. So it becomes a lot easier to educate people and also to teach them because there's some relation they can actually recognize and see when they actually experience the chimpanzee.
Beautiful. What is the 3 biggest threats you're facing in your work with the chimpanzees?
Yes, the threats have evolved over time. When we started our project, the biggest threat at that time was the pet trade, because a lot of chimpanzees were being taken from the wild and they were being exported because there was a lack of security maybe 30 years plus ago, and security only became stable in the last 28 years or so. And that is when we're able to start our project and get this thing started. And at that time, that was the biggest problem, the pet trade, the hunting, the bushmeat trade. Those were the really, really big problems. But as systems got into place, as countries come together to protect wildlife species, the pet trade, much as it's still there, the threat has been a lot more reduced because countries are now more aware. They are more, they have more better security systems in place. There are better controls. Technology and communication has improved worldwide, and it makes it easy to track offenders. So other threats have emerged, or as they were already existing, but now they're becoming more severe threats. Currently, the biggest threat that we're facing with chimpanzees in Uganda is the destruction of the habitat. If 20 years ago, the rate of destruction of the habitat was slow, it was low, it was really not significant. But as population increased, as there is more security within the country, as there's more stability, there's been a population boom. Our numbers of people have increased tremendously over the last few years. And with that, there's need for more resources. And the easiest target is really the natural forests that are existing where this wildlife exists. And then they simply go and invade them, and they remove the wildlife from their own habitats and claim them for themselves. As human beings, we are very, very selfish. We believe everything on this earth belongs to us. And we deprive other species that are already existing in these areas and claim them for ourselves. So the destruction of the habitat caused by population explosion, also caused by industrialism. As our third world country keeps on developing, our governments are eager to improve the economy, to improve industry, and they have given a lot of concessions to developers, to industrialists, to investors, to literally do whatever they want without putting in consideration that the impact that their work is going to have on the environment. So until recently, there's been a lot of destruction of our environment, or our natural resources, from the forests to the swamps, to the water bodies. There's been a literal devastation. We've been losing literally about 20 to 25,000 hectares of natural forest every single year over the last 20 years. And if you really compare that, it's huge, huge amount of forest that we've lost. And in turn, that has led to the destruction and loss of a lot of wildlife, We know already from our own records that most of our wildlife actually lives outside protected areas. We have what we call protected areas, national parks, and game reserves, which were set up in colonial times by the colonialists, and none of these has been expanded, not anymore have been set up. And so most of the wildlife that lived outside these protected areas was previously able to thrive, but now for the reasons I've just given, because there's been a lot of population increase, there's a lot of industrialization. Many of these forests are being converted into tobacco plantations, into sugar plantations, into rice plantations. We are currently battling with other conservations to protect one of the forests called Bugoma. It has over 650 chimpanzees that live in there. It has a lot of other endangered species like Nahans francolin, it's a bird, lots of natural species of trees and herbs that don't exist anywhere else. And this forest, which is over 64,000 hectares, is proposed to be completely destroyed for sugar. Now, whereas we can appreciate the need for the government to create opportunities for investors to create jobs and produce more, there are certain things we don't need as much of. Already, currently, we produce much more sugar than we need as a country. Yes, we want to produce sugar for export, but we need to weigh the costs of this production in the long term. It may seem as a solution in the short term, but we are cutting down hundreds of thousands of trees. This is a huge carbon sink where we're able to absorb lots of carbon into these areas. And we're with the production of sugar, we're only going to be creating a larger carbon footprint. We're going to be emitting a lot more emissions over time. So it's a battle in courts, and that this is not only the current battle we're in, but we've been having a series of battles over other forests. Some we've won, many we have lost, unfortunately, but it is to the cost of our own environment, and we're already seeing the effects. Our seasons have changed. We're getting much longer droughts, we're getting a lot less rainfall, and it really takes a lot to bring this to the forefront, to explain this to industrialists. Because unfortunately, as human beings, we are driven by the short-term gain. we're only looking at the immediate gain in terms of dollars for now, rather than in the long-term gain for our generation and for our future generation. If we destroy our environment right now, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be paying the costs for this in the future. They'll be the ones suffering once we have longer droughts. They are unable to grow the food that they need, and they are unable to live off the land as we have done now. In Africa, we have the unfortunate belief that we still have plenty, which is not the case, and we need to learn from lessons from other, even developed countries where there's been destruction of environment, there's been heavy pollution, and try to learn from those mistakes and adapt the way we do business here to be able to benefit what we can without destroying the environment. And there are so many solutions available now.
Yeah. I'm very curious, the sugar you're talking about is you are sending Africa, do you also make sugar to other countries or around the world, or it's just only from Africa you're making sugar for?
Oh, well, the biggest threat, really, like I said, it's really more in Africa, but we already know that the issues of climate change and caused by destruction of environment are felt world over. You know, when we talk about climate change, the effects of industrialization in developed countries in Europe, in Asia, in the US, with the emissions of carbon that are happening, are affecting the world entirely, not in those regions where it's happening, because we share one world, we share one universe.
Yeah.
And if we cannot maintain the carbon sinks that we have, we cannot change the way our attitude towards our environment. We cannot change and accept that there is actually climate change happening, because a lot of people want to dismiss this and say that hullabaloo, that it is not actually happening. But we've seen this, we've seen this over the last 20, 30 years, the gradual changes that have been happening world over, the amount of devastation that is being to climate, storms, severe extreme weather conditions that have been happening, global warming that is causing the melting of the ice caps. All this is being contributed by different actions in the different parts of the world, not just in Africa.
Yeah, true, so true. So with that threat you are facing, how do we deal with it? Like, what is your solution to deal with it with in a powerful way?
Yes, now dealing with this solution has to be multi-pronged. You have to take several steps. And for me, what I believe in, first of all, is that, like I mentioned, education is very, very important. It is very difficult to have any change when people are not aware of what they are actually doing is causing any harm. And as long as we don't create awareness, as long as we don't educate people about what is happening in their small environment and also on a large scale with the world over, we cannot effect much change. We always say it starts with you. And also when you start with yourself, you need to educate yourself first, get to learn all the facts. It is easy for somebody to come and tell you this is what you're supposed to do, but for you to own it and believe it, you need to believe in it and you need to learn about it. So you need to appreciate why it is that this threat exists. And once you understand how the threat exists, why it's existing, why it's happening, that is now where you can also now start to appreciate what you need to do to start creating some change, or to stop or to reverse whatever negative effect is happening. And that is not very easy. Many times there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of pros and cons, and there are always two sides to a story. There are those that will promote the other side, there are those that will promote this side. So you need to expose yourself to as much knowledge as possible, as such you can be able to make an informed decision. And any rational person will realize that these things are happening around the world. There actually is climate change. They will actually realize that the effects of human activity are negatively impacting on the universe. They will actually realize that there are actions that we can start doing on a personal basis, as communities, as governments, and push policy to change towards reversing the effects that are happening or that are taking place currently because of the actions we are doing. So once we have the awareness and education done and people appreciate, then that's when you can effect some change and reverse some of these changes. What we've done as a Chimpanzee Trust, as an individual organization, we already know that education is important. And we've done a lot of awareness on a small scale to start with the communities we work with, those that live next to Chimpanzees. And it takes time. It's not something that you're going to change overnight. It takes time for them to appreciate, have long-term discussions. They come up with their own solutions. And they have been able to come up with their own solutions designed for the situation in which they live. And with that, they have come up with their own, for example, one quick example I can give. Some of the communities we work with now appreciate the need to protect the chimpanzees. They've come to realize that animals, whether they are domestic or wildlife, have a role to play in sustaining the ecosystem. They've realized there's a need to actually have more trees, because they have realized all the time they cut down the trees, our streams are running drier, our soils are no longer as fertile as they used to be. We're unable to get as much as we can out of the ground. Much as we put in lots of fertilizers, etc., they're getting less and less out of it. And so we say, how can you still be able to benefit from your piece of land and be productive, while at the same time making sure your effects are not being felt on the environment? So they come up with their own techniques. We've had techniques that have been developed locally to make sure that they conserve their streams and the silting, using different types of crops, intercropping, different types of grass to make sure they don't encroach on the riverbanks, they don't encroach on the streams. They plant trees which they know they can intercrop with, or they have also learned how to change the way they do agriculture to make sure that they can reuse the same pieces of land over and over again and remain as productive as possible without needing to cut down more land. They have come to learn that even with the large plantations that are there with the sugar and the tobacco, there's a way in which they can actually do this within the existing land, or convert land that has already been destroyed or been converted almost to arid or semi-arid land back into productive land rather than turn into forest. And with that, that's taken, one of the communities we work with, it's taken us nearly 10 years to get them to change that. But it has been a very strong message that these communities themselves are now the ones fighting, not through us, but them themselves as community people, to protect the forest, because they have appreciated that this forest gives us so much. Once it's gone, we may get cash in terms of sugar for the next few years, but after that, our children and grandchildren suffer. So the education has really, really been important, working with the communities and coming up with their own solutions. So we've had programs where we do a lot of tree planting, we do a lot of reforestation in areas that have been degraded, those that have been abandoned after appearing to be non-productive. We've developed programs to have people gain a lot more from their land using new technology, where it was believed that you could only be able to benefit if you have a huge, huge acreage. We're teaching people that you can actually make a livelihood, go to school, have money in the bank on a much smaller piece of land if you just change the way you do your business, the way you do your agriculture, your farming. If you change the type of crops to make sure that you get high yielding crops, not necessarily those that are genetically modified now, using your own traditionally grown systems that were there in the past before pre-colonial times. And this, we have also learned that many of these things that they are actually doing are things that their ancestors used to do to remain productive or to make land more productive. And also how to use the forest sustainably, how to make sure that areas that have been cleared or can be replanted with indigenous trees rather than exotic trees, understand what it is that each of these, the roles of the wildlife play, including plants and animals and birds, in making sure that the ecosystem is kept, how to make sure that the rivers are not silted, they do not get polluted, how to dispose of waste, how to get energy from around their community. We have programs where they do their own composting, they do their own briquettes instead of cutting down trees for fuel. They have now started using more and more solar, which is quite impressive, rather than relying on wood fuel, because our communities are really, really poor. And very many of them previously relied on wood fuel for their cooking, their lighting, their heating. But they're now finding alternative means to use what they have without removing what it is in the forest, or to go and remove what they can from the forest without really having a negative impact on it. So there are so many actions, I can't really list all of them down, but it really comes from changing attitudes of the people that they come up with their own solutions. Some of them may take their own actions, which sometimes seem queer, but they end up working out. They pilot them and then they teach them to others. Different regimes of intercropping, which increase productivity, different ways of waste management and waste control, reduce pollution in their communities, different ways of farming to prevent soil erosion that will cause the silting and pollution of their streams and rivers, being able to dig their own wells, and to be able to get underground water, how to make sure that underground water or these aquifers are continuously replenished. And also at the same time making sure that they are able to make a living, they're able to have a livelihood, they're able to send their children to school, they're able to access medical services, they're able to live better lives at the same time. And that way also they are up to living with the wildlife, how they react to wildlife, how they react to chimpanzees or elephants in the forest, and also how these wildlife can be kind of, get used to living with them without having conflict between the two. There are communities that live with wild populations of chimpanzees in harmony. The chimpanzees come through their gardens. They are not as destructive as, say, for example, the baboons. And the community actually provides for them. Say, no, we will have so many bananas, they are rested. Wildlife can have them. And there's no conflict, but that has taken time. And it has taken time to also build the trust between the wildlife. We're so fortunate that on our end, we work with such a highly intelligent species that with time they can connect with the communities in which they live. And these communities don't cause us harm. We also think they don't need to cause them harm. And one particular community that has been worked on in collaboration, especially the Jane Goodall Institute, has just an inspiration to all of us.
Beautiful. So in that work you're doing, what successful story do you have to share? Like, what have you in all that threat you're facing, how you're dealing with it? What is like the end of the results? Like, what have you created for the Chimpanzees?
Well, one thing that we've been successful and we continue to hope to be successful with, because one of our goals is to preserve the chimpanzee in the wild, where they should be, where they must be, make sure they feel safe. And we've worked in a few communities in Western Uganda. We worked in Western Uganda in the districts of Hoima and Chikuve. And what we've been very successful with in the communities that we work with is that they have been able to live in harmony with specifically the chimpanzee and other wildlife that they live in close proximity to, where they share the same resources. They share the forests, they share the water sources. These animals also use the same water resources, while at the same time reducing the risk both to themselves and to the chimpanzees, to make sure that they're protecting themselves from acquiring diseases. So these techniques have been from a number of activities. We have a program that specifically targets children and women. In our poor communities, most of the work in the home is done by the women and the children. They're the ones that go to look for firewood, they're the ones that go to look for water, they're the ones who do the farming. The men also do farming. So with that, they come to expose themselves to wildlife. For example, I hope you can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Yeah, the forest that they open up, sometimes they cut down forests to, say, plant a garden. And in the past, what they used to do, plant maize, plant mostly maize, beans, things that they don't know day to day. And because these are areas where wildlife originally had trees, where they had fruit trees, where they had fig trees, they would come and now eat their crops. And then that created a lot of conflict. And as they tried to chase them away, there was a lot of conflict that caused fatalities on both sides. The men would go hunting the chimpanzees and other wildlife, the elephants, they would go hunting the bush pigs and lay traps for them. At the same time, when chimpanzees would encounter these people in the gardens, there would be also some attacks. And unfortunately, most of the targets were women and children, especially children, because Typically, when the mother goes to the garden, she goes with her baby, she goes with her 3-year-old, and as she's digging, she tucks him away in the shade under a tree or in the bush. And the chimpanzee would often come and pick up a baby, either out of protection or out of trying to take advantage of, they see humans as threats and they try to kill the younger one because they're much easier targets. And that has created conflict. So what we did in these communities, we went out and did education and outreach discussions or interactions with the women and the children. We involved the children a lot. We spoke to the children and tell them how to respond to chimpanzees. When they see chimpanzees, when they're going to fetch firewood, how should they respond? How should they show that they're non-threatening? How should also the farmers react when they see wildlife, such that they do not create that animosity that exposes them as threats? How can they protect their farms and gardens from being raided without poisoning, without killing? So we proposed the different cropping regimes. We proposed reusing the land that they have previously used instead of cutting out more forests. So they have changed their attitude, they have changed their way of growing crops. Instead of growing maize, maybe we should try the potatoes. Teams don't really like the Irish potato. Maybe we should try maybe we should try the ginger, maybe we should try the chili. These are not foods that they would actually eat, but they gain a lot more money out of them. Then they're able to go to the market and buy food from farmers that have far off farms where they're able to grow the food that they need. And what they've realized over the past nearly 10 years is that gradually they have become economically well off, much better even than the farmers who have farmland where they're able to grow crops, don't have issues with wildlife, because their crops are high value and they're able to reuse the land over and over again. And over time, because they have learned the behavior of wildlife, not only the chimpanzees, but particularly the chimpanzees, they have learned not to antagonize each other or to antagonize the wildlife and cause situations of conflict. So in the areas we've worked with, actually one of the reports we produced recently showed that there's been a decline by nearly 70% of incidences of conflict between farmers and wildlife. And generally, I'm speaking wildlife generally, both, whether it is forest elephants, whether it is snakes, whether it is chimpanzees, whether it is baboons, and vice versa. There's been less conflict. Also on our end, with the forest rangers, there's been less incidences of traps and less incidences of poisoning and poaching going on. And to us, that's a huge, huge success, because now the communities are learning to live in close proximity with wildlife without harming each other.
That is beautiful. So with that knowledge you have now in what is really working good for you and create a beautiful resource, is what do you really want to share with the knowledge, with the audience, with that now?
One thing I want to share with the audience first, it's important to live well, to live healthy. I strongly believe that as long as you are stable in your mind, you're healthy, you're well, you have less negative energy as a human being. You have less negative energy to share out. You're not bitter, you're not easily offended. You're more accepting, you're more willing to learn. Once people don't take care of themselves, when people have stressors, if people are poor, if people are unable to provide food for themselves or for their family, if people are unable to provide education or getting the basic needs, shelter, food, and a healthy life, then it becomes a lot harder for them to have any change in attitude, because already they are having such a negative lifestyle about them. So once you live better and try to live better without destroying the environment, take better care of yourself, eat well, eat healthy, exercise, then also educate yourself. Like I already mentioned, I can't stress how much important it is that we should continue to learn as much as possible every single day. Expose yourself a lot more to learning and experience yourself. And once you do that, take care now of those around you and take care of the environment in whatever way. And it's only through your learning that you will decide as a person the best action that will fit your situation. Many times we tell people, do this, do the other. Don't throw paper bags all over the place. Don't litter. Don't pollute. But until they understand why it is that if I pollute, what's going to happen, so they learn that it makes that action much more permanent. Otherwise, it will just be temporary, or it will be a habit that will take a long time to develop without really any belief. But once people understand and learn why it is I need to do something first, and then they can devise their own means of what it is they need to do. If it means that I'm going to take a simple action of making sure I use less water in my home to conserve water, I'm going to take the action to be more, aware of the environment, to stop littering, to stop, to educate my children and to make sure they understand the need to protect wildlife. I need myself to educate myself and appreciate and learn that I need to protect the wildlife. So really, on terms of actions I think should need to come out of people only after they have understood why they need to take these actions, and then come up with their own actions that fit in the situation that they live in. It is easy for me to sit here at home and say I'm going to try and use less polythene bags and use less water or whatever. And it's a different situation for somebody living thousands of miles in a remote area who does not even have access to clean water to begin with. What kind of actions can this person take to protect the environment? It needs to, for them to understand why they need to protect the environment and design or come up with methods or actions that they can do within their situation that will help. Maybe I need to dig trenches around my small piece of land to make sure that we don't have enough soil erosion. I need to make sure that I can make briquettes from the waste that I make. I can use an energy saving stove because I still need to use wood fuel. I have no alternative, but I can use less wood fuel if I have an energy saving stove. I can be able to provide heating, or I can be able to start my own nursery garden, be able to learn how to graft a tree so that I can graft an indigenous tree with an exotic tree in my area that I work with. So the different actions really vary according to the situation that different communities and individuals are exposed to. And it only comes from once they appreciate and understand why it is they need to take action in the first
place. That is so beautiful. So in this message about, you have shared a little bit about like protecting wildlife. Why it is so important for people to get, with few words, to really get more awareness around protecting wildlife and really stand for force for the wild animals?
Just a moment. Sorry, could you repeat that?
So it's like you're talking a little bit about how people can change themselves, like it's all about like mental health, because it's our actions is reflecting about how I am inside, like how I feel behind my head. My actions reflect about that, because if I have a lot of pain in me or a lot of things I have not dealt with, my actions is reflect about that. I take bad choices. I'm not aware about my things.
Yes.
And as you also talk about, it's all about like you to be well, like you have a good life, think about yourself first. So on that point, you have more like room for really know how to be more aware of the animals, protect wildlife. So how can people make a change in with more few words in their own lifestyle? So how can I make a change where I'm in Denmark to serve your organization?
Yeah. Yes. Like I said, it starts with, getting yourself well.
Yeah.
And what can you do? It's the simple action you can take is, first of all, identify the negative energies in your life. What is it that is at the back of your mind that is unsettling you, that is leading you to not live well? What is it? Do you have any emotional baggage? Do you have any different stressors in your life? Now you need to deal with that first, but you need to deal with that only if you take action to recognize that there are these issues. Many people don't even realize that there's so much negative energy around them and in them. So many times they don't even take any action. So I think many times we need to take a step back, look internally to ourselves, and identify where our actual problems, our real problems are. And once we have a myriad of problems, every single person has different issues they are dealing with at any one time. Deal with those issues such that you create room within yourself to be more compassionate. And it starts with simple things, trying to live healthy, trying to exercise, trying to eat better, take better care of yourself, make sure you rest enough, make sure you have enough sleep. It's a very simple step. Many people don't have enough sleep. They don't eat correct. And that cumulatively affects you as a human being, and also the way you think, the way you act, and to make you less compassionate, less willing to care for other individuals, or to care for the environment, or care for wildlife if you cannot care for yourself. So we put ourselves first and best and well by eating better, getting enough rest, exercising, making sure you get an air exam. Surround yourself with positive people, positive energy, because we are gregarious. We are gregarious people. We are people, so we really need other people around us. But once you have negative energy, you're going to attract negative energy. But once you have positive energy, you're going to attract positive energy. Find people, I can't stress how important it is to have somebody to care for and cares for you. It has a huge impact for you and for the other person as well. So those are the small actions you can start with before now you start trying to educate yourself more about what's happening around you, and then coming up with actions by yourself on what you can do to improve your environment, to impress upon others, to teach others to also improve themselves and improve their environments. And then in the long run, hopefully with time, people will become more compassionate and be able to better to protect and care for the wildlife.
That is a very powerful message, to really focus on yourself, like your own health, before you can really get the energy, get the compassion, like what you call room in your brain to think about others, because it's all about the circle of life. If I'm not aware about my actions, if I'm down at your organization as a volunteer and making a beautiful different and all that, I want to come back home again and back to the same lifestyles as all this sum is about. I'm just making the same damage again I've just been out and working for, because I need to change inside before I can make the change. Yeah, so that's so beautiful. So the last thing you really want to share with the audience, very short, what will that be if you have some few words to share with them?
A few words that I would like to share with the audience. First of all, thank you for taking the time to log in and for watching us. I want to thank Tanya for putting this together. And I want to ask every person that's watching this show, please share this with everybody out there that you know, and start by, like I said, look at yourself, take better care of yourself, and then learn to take care of others, and other things and around you. So that is really my message to everybody. Find the issues within yourself, take better care of yourself, and then you'll be able to care for others around you.
That is a powerful message. It's also something I live by. Care of myself before others, because you come from a good place in the heart.
Yes, sure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshua, for being a part of this interview and sharing the message from the organization. That is big blessing. So thank you so much for your time.
I thank you for the opportunity, and it has really been my pleasure.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much. And to you, audience, if you go back to the newsletter, there is all the information about the organizations. There is also a workbook where there is some steps you can do in your own lifestyles. So we really invite you to use a half an hour after this, or just 50 minutes, where you really focus on where can you make a change in your lifestyle, because with that knowledge you give now is so important for you to put a commitment on it. Is on that point you can and will make a change. If you wait in 1 hour, 2 hours, the information you get, or the aha moment, the awareness is a little bit gone from your mindset. It's going so quickly. So please, we invite you to, after this, use some time to think about what is the next step you can do to make a small difference in your own lifestyle. So thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing day out there. Bye, everyone.
Bye.